Today we're meeting with Mr. Spencer for our Bass for the Brave program. Today we're going to be installing a walk-in tub for Mr. Spencer, and thanks for the services that you've provided for us in our country. Thank you very much for the services, sir.
Thank you.
Just kind of give us a little background on yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
From New Orleans, born and raised until I got into the airline industry, and from there, it was from New Orleans to Houston, Houston, Los Angeles, New York, New York, Atlanta, and Atlanta back to New Orleans. And finally, Katrina gave me a hardship discharge. My wife and my youngest son moved here from Katrina, and I was doing a commute from New Orleans to Houston for about 3 years until I was able to get a hardship transfer to Hobby Airport, which was a smaller commute, which
Man, that's a
36 miles one way.
right. That's a lot of traveling.
It's a lot of traveling, yes.
Oh, your arm?
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of shaking the table.
So, tell us a little bit about your what branch did you serve in? What years did you serve?
I was drafted into the U.S. Army in 1967, October 18th to be in fact, till October 17th, 1969. I was at Fort Polk, Louisiana for basic training, advanced infantry training at Fort Polk, and I was a holdover, and from January until March, waiting on orders to Vietnam. Actually, that was my next 30-day leave and to Vietnam over.
Wow.
Yeah. It was, I think, one of the best things that ever happened to me in my lifetime was to experience storming. Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
From Fort Polk, I was a 30-day leave home. My mother, my two sisters, my father died on Christmas Eve of '62. And so when I got the letter, the orders for Vietnam, that just kind of blew her away.
Right.
She knew what was happening. We knew some friends whose kids were killed in Vietnam, and that didn't sit too well with us. So after getting to Vietnam, we flew into Cameron Bay. It was a commercial airline. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, it was Northwest Oregon.
Really?
And we flew into Cameron Bay about 10 o'clock that night, got off the aircraft, and we were brought to another bus that brought us to an airfield, Cameron Bay Airfield. And from there, we flew into Tonsanuk Air Base, which was right a little after Tet. Tet was in January, this was in April. And there were holes in the terminal building from mortars and rockets hitting the terminal. Looked like houses could fit into them. So that was, for a 19-year-old, that was a hell of an experience. And to say everyone down, when you said down, I mean down. So learn that quick. Incoming, you learn that quick. So from there, I was assigned Joseph Weed, he's the commander for the American Legion in New Orleans, and through the Purple Heart Auxiliary, I think it is, Colleen, called me and she said Joe submitted my name to be chosen for the MaxHome Super Tub, I call it. And Jill came by, Jill and Chris Petrie. I remember the name because that's a politician name, Petrie. And we sat here and talked and they discussed why I was chosen, and nothing else I could store and supplied Agent Orange and 500-gallon barrels or whatever. Had no clue what it was. All we knew it was to kill trees and deformants in the bush. So coming home, no, there was no like they do in the Veterans today, which is a good thing. You go through all this medical. You went through medical and they say you're okay and you go home. So from there, in 2002, I had a 90% blockage in my left ascending artery and was told it was a widowmaker. And from there, I worked at the VA. I was working for Delta Airlines, paying a lot of money for medication. He told me to go to the VA. Well, I went to the VA to get my medicine. It was $7 per prescription, cheaper than 100 prescription for my heart disease. And before you could get the medication, you had to see a psychiatrist. When reviewed by the psychiatrist, I was discovered I had post-traumatic stress disorder and was assigned to a psychiatrist in New Orleans, Dr. Miller, who was a really nice lady. And from there, I started going to group therapy in New Orleans with Joseph Weed, who's and at the time, he was just an American Legion member. Joined the American Legion there, and from there we started to get information now about some of the diseases that Agent Orange caused. Well, after probably 8, maybe 10 years, heart disease was put on her, assuming that it come from Agent Orange. So that I was compensated for that, and continued to go through the group therapy with the PTSD groups. And from there I was, determined I had post-traumatic stress. And from there I was paid another compensation for that illness, which is a serious illness. And a lot of people don't understand the illness that post-traumatic stress brings. In fact, it's guys that go to the VA and sometimes they never see a doctor. There's been a lot of suicides from just not being in the right places. And for me, I'm thankful that I met the people that I did meet. And here I go to Dr. Miller, who's another outstanding mental health doctor who put me into another group. And to the group I go to now, it's in Tomball, Texas. It's called the Peer Support Group, which is a lot of guys going through some worse than what I'm going through, but it's where you could release and discuss and talk about things that you can't talk about with just people who wouldn't understand, like my wife, for instance. She and my mother, when I came home, my mom told me something. I'm not the same son that I was when I left her a year ago.
Tell me, you said you were happy to have the people in your life. Tell me a little bit about your wife, how you met your wife.
I met my wife in New Orleans. My wife is from Glassboro, New Jersey, and she was working for National Airlines at the time, which I was working for National. And she was in reservations, temporary duty for Mardi Gras. My wife had never heard of New Orleans, not less Mardi Gras. Glassboro is a little small country town, about 50 miles from Atlantic City, south of Atlantic City.
Okay.
And her friend, who was dating a good friend of mine, we were working together at National, introduced us. And from there, we started dating, and she decided to move permanently to New Orleans. From there, National Airlines, the industry was either you get laid off or transfer. So we decided to transfer to Houston. This is in 78, 79. We came to Houston, lived in apartments, and from there we decided to buy a home. First time home buyers who knew nothing about buying a home. We had this amortization where your mortgage would increase for so many years or with the stock market or whatever. But anyway, that didn't work out. So we decided to go into another apartment. Meanwhile, Pan Am bought National Airlines while we were still here. And from there, the oil industry, which was booming at the time, took a nosedive. Pan Am was the largest airline operated. There was no Southwest at the time. And from there, we got laid off again. Found out she was pregnant. She had to go to Miami. I couldn't go to Miami, so I went to Los Angeles. We worked for 3 or 4 years after my first son was born. He was born April 15th, tax day, in 1986. And we literally met in the terminal in New Orleans Airport. My days off, I would fly to New Orleans. I should back up. My mother kept my son until he was like 5 months old. Well, she was going back to Miami. I was coming from LA to New Orleans to be with my son. And my 2 or 3 days off back until finally the shuttle in New York, LaGuardia, the Delta shuttle was Pan Am shuttle. Wiseman retired. I was not retired. He did his time. He came out as a captain in the Air Force. He did the Air Force ROTC in the Ohio State University. Came out second lieutenant, then the first lieutenant and the captain, and he decided it was time for civilian life. So that's it. My 2 boys have proudly served our country as did their father. And Marcus, I volunteered. Marcus was a Navy Sea cadet in New Orleans at Bell Chase. And regular drill. We had drill like once a month, just like the regular Navy, provided uniforms and everything. And from there, we came here. Katrina ran us here. He stopped after 5 years. And he went to Tulane University, and I told him to get into the ROTC. He didn't want to. Naturally, New Orleans is part